Welcome back to another UNC basketball recruiting podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you are checking us out on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, who joining me is our very own David Sisk. And before we get into tonight's topic, just make sure you go to TarHeelIllustrated.com, check out a lot of what we got going on there. Not everything is premium. We got a lot of free content on there for you, but a lot of the really good, juicy stuff is premium, and so much of it is on our message boards. And the only way to access that is to become a premium subscriber to THI, and it's just $8.33 a month. The only free stuff you ever get from David Sisk is what we do here on the podcast. Everything else is pay, and it's very much worth it just getting his info by itself. David, that's I'm pumping you up, man. So you got to live up to it here in this podcast.
Well, you know, and I will have to admit, this is the second time we ran this or taped it. Didn't. We had some problems last night. So you started out last night and you said that they could, get some of my wisdom. And I hated to admit that while you said that, I was watching wrestling, a cage match on television. So
you got to scrap the wisdom stuff now.
Yeah, that probably doesn't go together.
Our former photographer, Bruce Young, you now will have gone up in his list. You are now his favorite THR because he's a wrestling guy. So that's okay. We've joked about wrestling.
Live in North Carolina. How could anybody live in North Carolina and not be? Ric Flair, all those guys that came out of there. How could you not be?
Hey, we're going to get to Carolina basketball recruiting here in just a second, but I told you I used to cover the Carolina Hurricanes too. I probably covered about 160, 170 games. And during the course of games, they have a Ric Flair clip that they play where he's going, woo, and they show it a bunch on the screen, and people eat that stuff up. So Ric Flair in a Carolina Hurricanes sweater is going woo is a sight to see. And I saw it. If I did 160 home games, that means I probably saw that, I don't know, about 850 times. I'd say 5 or 10 was enough, though.
He was on Paul Feinbaum once, and he said his pet peeve was when people say North Carolina instead of North Carolina, and North Kakalaki or Kakalaki.
I don't like Kakalaki. The first one you said, that sounds like the first one you said
North
sounds like
Carolina.
Leonard Hamilton. That's what Leonard Hamilton.
Yeah,
Leonard Hamilton.
And he said that's his. When people don't say North Carolina, he said that's his pet peeve.
All right. Well, we're going to get to North Carolina Tar Heels basketball recruiting here. We're going to talk about the class of 2022 offers that Hubert has recently handed out. And of course, most of them were kids that already had offers from Roy Williams, but Hubert is going to go through the process of re-offering some of those kids. But before we do, you were at the Midwest Mania. See, this wrestling talk has jumbled my brain. It's gone mush just like that. The Midwest Mania in the Indianapolis area a couple of weeks ago. I know you were really excited to go up there because it's the first time you've been able to go to an event to watch prospects in person since 2019 because of all the stuff that happened. So some of your general thoughts about that event, about seeing kids there, and we'll kind of go through that, and we'll eventually get to some of these Carolina offers.
Really, it's the first time that I'd basically seen a red light in a couple of months, in a year probably. I didn't cover AAU tournaments last year, but I went and watched some open gyms and a couple of camps, and one was in Memphis, and it was on the east side. You never got into town. It was right when you got into Shelby County. So I could just take the highway here close to where I live and jump on it and never get off of it. And then the one in Nashville was in Brentwood. It was south, so you never get into town there. So just going through Nashville and Indianapolis traffic, I forgot what it was like, and trying to get in restaurants, forgot what that was like. So, and then, you get into the basketball, and it was good because, if nothing else, you had some full gyms. They had showcase games, Amani Bates against Jalen Duren, just something I won't forget. Just maybe the matchup might have been overrated a little bit with the teams, but just to see the fan, especially young fans, the response, just both guys swarmed after the game, just kind of let you say, hey, maybe we're getting back, closer to life the way we were used to it before COVID hit.
So in the last year plus, when you're doing what you do as far as covering recruiting for us and also for the Kentucky site, and just you're an avid consumer of the sport and all sports really. When you go watch an event like this, how different was it for you to actually be able to objectively watch these kids in person, to see more of their mannerisms, to watch them play off the ball when maybe if you're watching clips of a kid online, you don't get to see that kind of stuff? How beneficial was it for you to get the full view of what these kids are about?
This was the first tournament that I'd been to, AAU tournament, in years, honestly, that was not a shoe circuit event. Now, most of the teams, and what they probably had 300 teams, but they were going down in age groups to really young, and they were playing different age groups and different gyms. I saw the 17 and under, what was called the showcase, and all of those basically were EYBL teams. So you pretty well had targeted who you were going to watch. And the one difference is normally the Pacers Center there in Westfield, which is north of Indianapolis. It's a big place. I think they said the largest facility for sports in the United States as far as soccer fields, baseball, softball, basketball, everything combined. It's huge. And normally there's 8 gyms going at one time. So if you go to EYBL tournament, you might have 3 or 4 different guys that you're watching playing at once on different courts. It makes it tough.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to interview players. So you have a certain time to interview and have to do it at a certain spot. Well, by the time you get done with that, it's usually about halftime of the next game. And you're going through that process, and then usually your Sunday morning, you're saying, okay, let's go back and maybe we'll get to see 2 or 3 guys and watch them play. And you really don't get to see a whole lot. I got to see more here, but I hadn't seen these guys. A lot of them I'd never seen play before. And that wasn't the case before, because you'd go to several tournaments and you watch kids since they were 15 years old. You kind of already knew them. But this case, you're really trying to learn kids and you're just watching. So you didn't really get specific. You're looking for kind of generalities. Well, can he shoot outside? How big is he? How athletic is he? Can he get to the rims? Is he right-handed? Is he left-handed? Does he play defense? You're looking at those kind of things. And you like I said, you don't get into the sausage making really. You just look at the outward product. Before you really start to get cute with your scouting. So that was the big thing. But, I got to see most of those guys play twice. So, and one thing I noticed was generally what you saw one time was what you saw both. So that was just, I felt like I got a pretty good read. And I look forward to seeing some of them again the spring, the summer, and then look forward to seeing a lot of new guys, because really you just scratched the surface with what we saw. I mean, there's just so many players out there we need to look at.
Now, I know we're going to get into Derek Lively in a few minutes before we get there, and he's at Carolina Targets. But before we get to him, for the coaches that are going to finally be able to get out and see these kids in June and be able to watch them the way you watched them the other night, how much are they going to benefit right out of the gate? Watching film of a kid for a year, let's say they've been developing a relationship on Zoom and through FaceTime and texting for a year, and they've watched clips. A lot of the clips are pretty old for some of these kids. How much is it going to help them if they got 30 kids on their radar to dive in, and by the middle of July, maybe they could whittle that in their mind down to 20? Is that going to be a pretty quick process that we'll see unfold here once June kicks off?
Last spring, they were playing a lot of tournaments in Atlanta. And I was watching a lot of kids play in the Atlanta area, and the games were live streamed. And you had 1 or 2 things. And a lot of them, they had good announcers, and I'll say that for them. But you're watching a game, and you've got a camera either at the scores table or on the floor level at midcourt. and you can't. There could have been a mass murder in the lane. You wouldn't have known it. Or you're watching. They've got a camera up at the very top of the gym at half
Yeah, I've
court,
seen a lot of those.
and you can't tell who's who. And when they did that, if they had, I wouldn't even watch them. You know, I said, this is just a waste of time. I don't even know who they are.
They all look the same height. They all look
was
the same height from that angle.
Yeah, you can't tell. You don't even know which team switch a lot of times. So, the coaches have had a lot to watch, a lot of that. They've watched a lot of film. But if you're North Carolina, you've got to make a choice. Okay, we're into 2022. Well, maybe we've watched a lot of film here, but let's say we're going to cut down. We're going to recruit 4 or 5 point guards. Well, which one's it going to be? You can't offer I say this: North Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, schools like that. If you go you can go to Verbal Commits, the website, and Google just North Carolina verbal commits, and it'll pull up a chart of who they've offered. And the reason I like it, you can pull up any team. Pull up Duke, pull up Kentucky, pull up Illinois, pull up teams like that are really strong programs, and you'll see how many guys that they've offered.
Yeah.
Or North Carolina, they're very, very selective. Kentucky, for example, picked up 2 assistant coaches today, both from Illinois, Chin Coleman and Antigua. And I kind of looked at some players that they had offered at Illinois. Illinois in a 2022-23 class had offered 59 players. Kentucky had offered 4. And North Carolina's not far behind. I think all in all, North Carolina may have offered 8 or 9. So that tells you how selective. You can't, if you're North Carolina, you can't offer every kid you think is going to be good. Because like I told you last night, it'll look like a football team. You'll have 85 people on basketball scholarship because people want to play there. So you can, not only can you get the best players and kind of select and draft, but you got to be careful who you offer and make sure you're getting the best player. Because like I said, you don't want to settle and offer a good player and settle when you're really not done your due diligence, and there could be a player who was better that you could have had.
One of the things I enjoyed about your coverage from Indianapolis was what you wrote about Derek Lively, the way you described his game and where his game could well go. And also you had an interview with him. I thought it was pretty interesting when he had to say, once you kind of take everybody through what you saw from him and then what you learned from him once you finally got a chance to spend a little bit of time with him.
If you ask any kid at 7 feet who their role models are, they're all going to say Kevin Durant. And so there's not many 7-foot 3-point shooters out there, he's just an anomaly. But athletically, I just look at a Anthony Davis, maybe a Marcus Camby type of player like that. And that's kind of what I see in him. He's not raw offensively by any stretch of the imagination. He's so long. I thought he was about 6'11", and I'm seeing scouting reports now that say as much as 7'2". I don't know about that. But he may be 7 feet. He could be. And normally when you're that tall and you're that long-limbed, that long-armed, it's hard to get that elbow under the ball. Because your arms just go forever. So, but it's not a broken shot. It looks pretty good. I even think he could be a pick and pop player offensively. He can definitely roll to the bucket off the ball screen, but just his athleticism, like I told you, he can run the floor with the fastest guard in America. I don't think there's a guard in America that could outrun him 94 feet. He's that fast. He's agile. He's coordinated, great feet, just athletic, long, 7 feet, jump over the backboard. He's just that kind of player. And like I said, I think Marcus Camby, Anthony Davis, those were guys that you would expect in college. You kind of look at, and I know they could be dominant, but you look at them and you can say, okay, on good teams, they're probably 12 to 15 point a game scorers. And he's not a guy that scored. He's not Durant. He's not going to score 40. But man, just his size, length, athleticism, it's just phenomenal.
In what ways is he graceful at this stage, and in what ways is he still really raw?
Totally coordinated. And that's the best way I could put it, because like I said, he's so fast. He's pretty graceful on top of it, but he's just coordinated. He's not clumsy. It's not a baby deer, out there trying to get their balance. There's none of that. His strides are long. He's not a 5'8", 5'9" point guard with a little short burst of quickness, just stop, go, all that. I mean, his is long strides, but man, he's just one of those guys can fly, but like I said, just very coordinated. His hands and feet are together, natural timing to block shots, natural timing to go get a rebound, natural timing to run and maybe turn and pivot and catch and just do things like that all together that a lot of guys his size really struggle with at that age.
As far as being raw, you mentioned that he's not a big scorer yet. Is that part of the rawness? He's just got a lot to add to the skill part of his game?
Yeah, he's not a stretch guy yet. Like I said, in the term of a Durant or some of those guys, he's not like that. He's not a back to the bucket post, but he's not a new age kind of stretch. Like I said, he's one of those guys. He's going to score off rebounds. He'll make some jump shots and he'll score some around the rim, but he's going to get a lot of it on rim runs in the full court. Now I'm going to say this, in today's game, I think it'd be deadly in a pick and roll game simply because like a LaMarcus Aldridge was, guys like that they just set the ball screen and roll. And if the point guard gets into the lane, the big has to step up at all, man, you just throw that thing up in the air and there's nobody in the country going to be able to jump with it.
Yeah.
And he's got
he's
not going to fumble it around. That's where the agility comes in, where he can run and jump and not trip and fall, but run and jump and go catch and finish and do all that. And he can do that now.
He can economize movement, which is so huge for a big guy in those situations. The interest with North Carolina, we've talked, you wrote about it, we've talked about it without doing a podcast, kind of fill everybody in with kind of where things stand with Carolina's interest in him and how he views UNC with the new regime taking over.
He's going to have a blue-blooded recruitment. I mean, he's already got he got a Kansas offer before we left that weekend. I think I talked to him on Saturday night. He got a Kansas offer the next day. So, he's already got – North Carolina was the first, so that's good of the Blue Bloods. But, I mean, you're going to have North Carolina, Kansas, Kentucky will offer, Duke will offer. He said Duke was talking to him pretty heavily. They actually one of the first schools he mentioned, talking to him was North Carolina. Duke was one of the first he mentioned, and Duke hasn't offered. He mentioned Kentucky, they've not offered. You're going to see Villanova. I think a lot of those schools at that next level right there, Virginia, a lot of those, really strong schools up and down the East Coast. But I think he's a guy that gets offered by everybody beforehand. And I'll tell you something that we said last night. You may say, well, why is it important to offer right now? You got North Carolina's already set up 3 June visits. The dead period over May 31st at midnight. So June 1st, man, people are taking visits and you're making up for so much lost time because you've not been able to do that. And at that time, basically in about 15 months, 16 months. So, it's really important to get kids in on campus. They take officials in June. So I think it's really important to get them in and let them meet the coaches. These coaches have never met them face to face. They've never seen the campus. They've never seen the facilities. Everything you're doing is for the first time. So that I'm going to be interested to see who he visits, if he takes June visits, who he sees. That's going to be really, really interesting. And, because if it's officials, you can do 4 or 5 of them. So you can't pick 20. So who are the ones he chooses early on?
Yeah, the wow factor when we start talking to kids for football and basketball in June is going to be off the charts. It's going to be really, really interesting.
How busy you're going to be in June. It is going to be incredible.
We just went through in April. We just went through the
incredible.
April. This was the busiest April I've had, and June's going to be crazy. North Carolina. We're going to talk about 5 kids that Hubert has either offered for the first time, like Isaac Trout, or re-offered that Roy had already offered, and kind of gauge a little bit, see what we've gauged so far from Hubert's approach that might be a little different from Roy's. And also, you've talked to all these kids, what you've learned about how Hubert recruits, some of the lead recruiters on the staff, some of his assistants who have been very involved with some of these recruitments. So we're going to begin with the highest rated of the 22 kids in this group of 5. We're going to talk about Chris Livingston, the 6'6" kid from Akron, Ohio. He's the number 5 overall player in the class. You've written about all these guys here recently, so why don't you kind of walk us through Chris Livingston, the kind of player he is, and the whole North Carolina thing there.
Probably the best player or the highest ranked player in the 2022 class that's under 6'9". He's 6'6", true guard, but he's just such a physical specimen. Just overpowers people. He's ranked number 3. He's not. I can't see any way that he ever, even with you got to take the new rankings right now with a grain of salt because you've not seen these players live, but I don't see any way with what he does. He's such a specimen. He drops out of the top 5. Just a tremendous guard, but he's so physical, got such a body on him. There's been a lot of talk start this week about a reclassification into 2021. Yeah. If he does do that, he's also a kid that's going to be mentioned a lot for G League because of that. If he reclasses, he can't go G League. So that's going to be something to kind of watch and see what happens. So he's going to have a busy summer. I think if he makes that decision, it's going to be on down, in the summer. But I have to wonder with the transfer portal and everything, it's hard enough for 2022 kids with all these really good college players reclassing and moving. So I just think it'd be really tough for a kid to kind of pick where he wanted to go if he decides to reclass in July, because there's so many players moving, people are going to be full. So that's kind of where he stands. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, especially so late, like you're saying. I also wonder, we've talked before about kids that might reclass, and we talked when you first came on. We talked about Sky Clark about, would Carolina take him as a 21, or would they rather him just stay 22? That offer is for 22. If he reclasses to 21, UNC doesn't really want to deal with that. With a kid like Livingston, do you see any chance that if he did reclass to 21 and wanted to go to Carolina, Hubert would take him, or is there really no spot there for him right now? I would look at it and say, boy, it's going to be kind of hard to squeeze him in with what they have right now.
Well, it's going to come down if you have 13. I'm going to say this. If you've got one available at all, if you've got 12 scholarships taken, you've got to make room for him. He's too good. You don't turn down Chris Livingston.
Yeah. That would be interesting to see what he does. I just sense, without having any inside information with him at all, I think a lot of the kids that are thinking about it probably going to be wise not to. Just kind of hold off and go 22, because he'll have more options in 22 anyway. And the portal situation isn't going to be as crazy next year as it was this year. So it'd probably be wise for a lot of those kids not to do that. Jalen Washington, 6'8", at Gary, Indiana, the number 24 player in the class. I guess Hubert offered him about a week and a half ago, something like that. What kind of player
is he?
Actually,
over the weekend, actually a Sunday night, so it's only been about 4 days.
Well, that's the way things are going right now. Trust me. This April was unbelievable. We're still putting a bow on April, and here it is, May 6th. So that's how crazy things have been. Well, what kind of player is he, especially being a 6'8" kid? How do you see him fitting in with maybe the new vision that we're learning about how Hubert would like to play? And where do things currently stand with Jalen, Washington, and Carolina?
It's hard to say exactly where because he's kind of sheltered. And we put an interview up on the story we did when he got the offer. We ran basically a summary of him, informative story, but we did have an interview from the weekend at a tournament in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that Brian Newbert did with the Purdue site at the Rivals Network, Black and Gold. And he talked about North Carolina at that time. Now, this was less than 48 hours from the offer, but he was talking about a lot of North Carolina interest. He has always been highly ranked, but he had a knee injury, and he really worked on changing his game a little bit. So he's turned in. He was already athletic and long, and about 6'9", was a 4. He's really worked on his skills. So once his knee comes back and he can go 100% with his athleticism, it's going to be really a big time. He already is a big time prospect. Could be the total package though, because he's worked on stretching his game. So I think when you look at him, you're looking at an athletic 4 who's long, that could also has some skill level, can handle the ball and shoot it. So he's going to be a very, very intriguing package. I mean, I think Hubert made him a priority as soon as he got that job, because we hadn't heard a ton about North Carolina's interest. And he's one of the first guys that Hubert reaches out to that there hadn't been an offer for.
Yeah. Well, where is he with his health? Is he close to 100%? What is there a timeline there that you're familiar with?
It's hard to say with modern medicine. I don't know how far we've come on a knee. And what I mean by that, 15, 20 years ago, they said no matter how successful your knee surgery was, you might even look good. You might even look comfortable out there playing whatever sport you played. But it took 18 months to really come back 100%. And that was pretty well an unwritten rule. I don't know where that stands now. I know it's not 18. It's a lot less than that. I don't know how much less. I've not seen him live, obviously, and I'd like to do that. He plays on the EYBL circuit. So, I mean, it's not going to be a problem, I don't think, even by the summer getting out and seeing him. But it sounds to me like he may not be quite 100%, but he's not far behind. And like I said, he's already picked up skill level. So everything that I've read from talent evaluators that watched him over the weekend were really impressed.
You've done a few pieces on Nick Smith back when Roy offered, and now Hubert re-offered him here just in the last few days. I guess yesterday maybe went ahead and spoke, or 2 nights ago, I guess he spoke to him and re-offered him. You could catch us up to that, but 6'4" guard out of Little Rock, Arkansas, number 36 in the class. I know you like him a lot. So tell everybody what it is about Nick Smith that you like and where things currently stand with Hubert Davis and the Tar Heels.
Nick Smith is not the overall just incredible athlete out there. Nobody's going to get him mixed up with Chris Livingston. So I think right now, and there's going to be people disagree with me on this, but he may be a little better than 36, but I think that's pretty accurate. The thing I heard over the winter, some guys that I talked to, and they saw the videos too. They didn't see him in person. They saw him in high school. And I think sometimes high school basketball, because the competition may not be as tough, I think a lot of times it can be slanted. And they said, well, he's the best scorer on the perimeter in the class of 22. I think he's a scorer. I don't think he's the best. The weight room is going to be his best friend. He's got to get, he's lean. He's not skin and bones, but nobody's going to mistake him for Charles Oakley either. So he's got to put on weight. Right now, he's a 2-level scorer. He can shoot the 3 really well. He can put it on the floor, and get to that mid-range and score. Really good shooter, off the catch, off the dribble, but he can't finish through what I would think high major contact from big, strong, powerful players that would play in the ACC. So he's got to get stronger there. I call him a really good two-level scorer. He's not a dynamic athlete. He's a really good athlete, but his skill's really good. His shooting's really good. Doing both, he's just got to be able to get stronger where he can get to the rim. And I think as he does that, he gets more explosive too. I think this is as low as he'll ever be ranked. He's not going to be the number one player in the country, but he's not going to be any lower than 36 in the future. I think he just gets better. And I think when we've talked about him before, I've kind of made the comparison maybe to Caleb Love, where I think Caleb Love's probably a little more on the ball, where Nick can be an off the ball player. But he's kind of that guy to me that looks like a 2-year college player at least, who gets probably a lot better by his second year. I texted with him this morning, Thursday, briefly, and he said that he is, North Carolina reoffered last night, and he is in the process of setting up a visit in June. He thinks he's going to do that. He said that he and the staff are just trying to get dates worked out.
In a basketball world in which the vision that Nate Oates has is taking hold more places, and I think we'll see more of it moving forward, what kind of value do you put a guy on, like Nick Smith, who can put it on the floor a couple times and pull up and hit that 15, 14-foot jumper in the lane?
The thing that I like about Nick Smith is he's got versatility. When I watched him, they played each one teach one. Who's really got some defensive stoppers, really good team defensively. They blitz every ball screen. They're going to trap, and they're doing it with they're doing it with 6-7 perimeters. And he was their best scorer easily, playing the shooting guard role, really good coming off screens, could catch, could shoot. Like I said, could put one dribble shot fake, put it on the floor, hit the mid-range. So he's scoring, but they were having trouble getting the ball out of that trap. So he turned out he was their best ball handler too. They moved him to point guard. Now it took away from his scoring, but at least he was able to get us some other guys some looks. I thought his vision was really good. And he's not going to be a point guard in college, but he's got some versatility where he can do that. So like you said, if you take the modern day game, this is what I gauge. And I may have said this on here before. This is what I gauge how good guards are. I think most guys can make things work off a ball screen. When a guy doesn't need a screen and he can get what he wants, those are the studs. So, and you look at Alabama, there wasn't a lot of ball screens. There was a lot of slip screens, all that. And that's really the way you're seeing less and less ball screens and more slip screens and even ghost screens where they just run through it, just to clear space. So
Baylor didn't run a lot of ball screens. Baylor didn't run a lot. They had a lot of guys.
That's perfect. They didn't have to, man. All you're doing when you got guards like that, you're just bringing more congestion into the equation. Where you've got the ball and one other guy in the pitcher. Now you've got the ball and 3 other guys in the pitcher. So I think Nick Smith's a guy that doesn't need a ball screen. But like I said, he's 2-level right now. So when he gets stronger, he's 3 levels. So you space the floor, and he'll be really good on the college. I don't know if he's going to be how strong a pro. He'll get drafted probably, but he's going to be a really good college player.
And the relationship with Carolina?
Really enjoyed I think has enjoyed getting to know Hubert Davis. And he told us he didn't know Hubert Davis. We've talked about Roy being gone, but Steve Robinson was really who he knew. And he told me when he got hired, when Hubert got hired, he was one of the first guys I called because I had a past relationship with him. He said, I've never heard of Hubert Davis, so I don't know who he is. So Hubert was not the lead recruiter for a lot of these guys.
He's not the first kid that said that.
So Hubert's had to make up ground. Not only was he not the head coach, he was not the lead recruiter for many of these guys. So,
which is why the reoffering part David, that's why the reoffering part is important. And people
Yeah.
need to understand that, yes, some of these kids had offers. Nick Smith, I believe, was right after Christmas. But Hubert offering, it's a new program in a lot of ways. It's a lot of newness there. So he's reestablishing some stuff. Hubert's getting to know these kids. It's not like, oh, I like this kid. I remember Roy liked him a lot, so I'm going to offer him too. There's a process that's going into it before Hubert establishes the reoffer in these cases.
Yeah, and like I said, he's just getting to introduce himself to these kids. I think they like what they see. Just to kind of bring it up again, Hubert is in talking to players and talking to Isaac Trout and talking to Nick and talking to Taylor and some of these other, they all tell me the same thing. He's just humble.
Yeah.
I think Hubert Davis, I don't. But you see the personality, and he appears to be that way. And you could see that in his press conference. No airs about him. He was the kid that was looked over coming out of high school. He knows he's in a great situation. He knows he's blessed. And that's the way he comes across to these kids, and he's himself. And like I've told you, I think it was good that he got to work with Roy Williams, because Roy Williams was like that. The good old Roy, he was what he was. Yeah. But I also would think it's good for Hubert to see that, he can be the alpha male too when he has to be with that team and put his foot down, because Roy did that. He wasn't Bobby Knight, where I heard Dan Dawkins say on his show, some coaches make it easy. He was talking about Lon Kruger. And he said, playing for Lon Kruger had to be easy. You never see Lon Kruger upset. He said, when I played and coached Bobby Knight, he said, going to get a sandwich was hard. So it's, I think Hubert, he could be that guy, but I think you got to see from Roy Williams that not only just being an assistant coach, that's a lot of times where it's good cop, bad cop. You're the player's friend, and you're the go-between the head coach.
Yeah.
It's changes when you become the head coach. And hopefully Hubert will see that Roy Williams, how to do that, because I think Hubert has a great humility, a great personality to make people like him. But like I said, can also command the room too.
There's no doubt about that. And I think that will kind of take on its own persona as we move into this thing, because once he goes to the cycle of being second guessed, he's ever been second guessed. Once he goes through a couple of losses and has to deal with the media 8 minutes after a loss and take our questions. And also when he has to go on the recruiting trail and people start recruiting against him. Right now, it's kind of hard to do that. They don't really, other than, hey, he's not experienced, but he's still Hubert Davis. He's still North Carolina, so he's got plenty to sell. It'll be interesting to see in a couple of years how he evolves as a recruiter, if his message changes, the way he delivers his message changes. And that's what's so interesting. Here we are 5 weeks into his tenure, what we've been able to gauge so far. We got 2 more kids to talk about. And I do want to also kind of hit on this, what we're learning about Hubert so far stuff. You mentioned Isaac Trout. Roy was establishing a relationship there, but there had not been an offer. So he's one of the kids that got a first offer from North Carolina, and it was from Hubert Davis. He's 6'9" kid from Grand Island, Nebraska, number 66 in the class. What do you like about his game, and how do you see him potentially fitting in to what we're learning about Hubert's vision and how he wants to play?
Isaac's a pure stretch so I think in a modern day game, if you're looking at a pick and pop, I think we're probably familiar with Brady Manick. So probably a Brady Manick type with a higher ceiling. And so, I've talked to a lot of these guys about, has Hubert talked about a playing style? And they said, yeah, he wants to maybe play 2 traditional posts at times, but be able to stretch it, be able to do both. If you get a guy like Isaac Trout, you're showing that you really want to stretch that floor out and play 4 guys. out on the perimeter. So we talked about Lively a little bit. Lively could even be a stretch 5 in ball screening, but Isaac Trout, he's definitely a stretch 4. And now he's the guy that already had a relationship with Hubert. So that's a positive there. And, immediately, he set up a visit. So he's one of the 3 players right now that set up visits in June. So North Carolina already, had a standing. Hubert Davis too already had a standing with him. So that's good.
He was wanting an offer previously, so he got one from Hubert. How do you think that resonates with him?
Well, he was one of the guys too that just talked about, Hubert's just his being down to earth, his humbleness. So I really think he already likes what he sees. And maybe I'm stereotyping here, but he's from Nebraska and he's a Midwest kid. And he seems like he has a lot of those values. And I think there's something to be said for that. I think there's certain players in certain places, maybe they don't deal with brashness as much. And I think he's a kid. It seems to me from talking to him, Justin Taylor seems to be a kid like that. They really can't talk enough about the personality end of it from Hubert, and just, there's no gloating, there's no airs, there's none of that. They seem to be really comfortable with that.
Charlottesville, Virginia, which is the home of the University of Virginia. As a native from Virginia, I can tell you that when you think of Charlottesville, you think of the gentleman from Charlottesville, the gentleman from the Commonwealth, the Thomas Jefferson stuff and all that. Justin Taylor is from Charlottesville, which is interesting that UVA is not a school that it appears that he's all that interested in, but North Carolina is. He's a 6'6" kid, number 69 in the class. He got offered here recently. He's also going to visit in June, and you just spoke with him a few days ago. I thought of all the interviews that you've done, these 5 kids that we're talking about, his to me was the most interesting. I'll get into more of that here in a few minutes, but tell everybody your thoughts about Justin Taylor, the kind of player he is, and the interest level in North Carolina.
He's a guy that'll have your job and my job here in a few years. I mean, just incredible ability to talk and communicate and share his feelings. And he was really good. I've been trying to really get these kids' feelings about him and find out kind of who Hubert Davis is. And, not only just what kind of playing style he's going to play, but who he is. And he went into great detail. He went into great detail about Roy Williams and Steve Robinson. If you remember, Roy offered him on the bus trip to Charlottesville in the snow. And Justin Taylor lives in Charlottesville, so they're going to go play Virginia. So I thought that was really ironic that he's driving to his hometown in the snow and calls him on the phone and offers him. And then you get, really where he talked about Steve Robinson and just how much he loved him. But then he, really started talking about Hubert. And I asked him one thing he said about the humility, and he brought it up. I didn't. And I said, we talked a lot. And number one, he said that Hubert really talked a lot about Dean Smith more than he did Roy, but playing for Dean Smith. And he said we had a lot in common, really shooting guards, really like to shoot the ball, from the Eastern Seaboard, a lot in common. And I said, well, did he mention anything about Pat Riley? He did that maybe he's got some NBA experience he would like to put into the system. And he said no, because I feel like if he did that, he would be talking about himself as an NBA player. And he just doesn't want to talk about himself. So, that kind of tells you what he had picked that out. I didn't drag it out of it. He had picked that out. So that kind of tells you who Hubert Davis is, and what Justin Taylor, who he thinks Hubert Davis is.
Yeah, I think the associations that Hubert has from his 12 years in the NBA are so impressive. Not just Pat Riley, Larry Brown, Don Nelson, he had Rick Carlisle. He was so many people. And plus all the guys he played with. He played with MJ. Played with MJ for a year with the Wizards. So very, very interesting that as we learn more about Hubert, that he hasn't played that card a whole lot, but kids know. I mean, they know what he's done. Their parents know. Their parents, I'm sure, if they follow basketball, they remember Hubert, so they'll know that stuff. But he's not recruiting them to go to the NBA, recruiting them to go to North Carolina, and they play in the Dean Smith. They play on Roy Williams Court in the Dean Smith Center, and Hubert played there, and he played for one, coached on the other. So he's going to sell that because that's the experience, and that's what I thought. What was really interesting about what Justin Taylor told you. Two different things. One, he seemed to be really intrigued by the full experience, the whole idea of being a part of what that program represents, and how it is not just being a player on campus, but perhaps just being a part of that family, which is something that sticks forever. And the other thing is the Jeff Lebo connection, because he said some of the same things about Lebo. He was a recruiter. Lebo played there. He talked about some similarities, and I thought that was really interesting, because as we learn about Hubert, we're also going to learn about how he uses his staff to recruit. With Roy, it was kind of every time we talked to a kid, 9 out of 10, it was Steve Robinson, then Roy. Every once in a while, you get a Brad Frederick. Very rarely do we get a Hubert Davis. But now you've got Sean May, who couldn't go on the road and recruit before, but can now. You've got Jeff Lebo. We've got Brad Frederick, who's been on with. We've heard all these names come up just in the last 5 weeks with some of these kids that we've talked to. So that's really giving us an indication that Hubert is doing things a little bit different than Roy did. He's using his staff a little bit more. And also, I will say, flurry of offers here in the first 5 weeks he's been on the job. Roy usually doesn't start handing out offers until June and July. Hubert's done this a little bit sooner, which I also find to be very interesting. And we get a lot of that from the very articulate Justin Taylor.
Yeah, and like I said, I just feel like that you've got to give these offers out a lot before June and get visits set up, because he was one of the first ones to set up. May have been the first guy to actually set up a visit in June. Two things. He mentioned Jeff Lebo, and I'm glad you brought that up. Can't believe it skipped my mind a while ago, but he talked about Jeff Lebo, and he really didn't know Jeff Lebo before. He said they'd been texting, and then when they called, he said he felt like they hit it off, because Jeff Lebo, same thing. He said they're both shooting guards. They're both from kind of the same area of the country. And he said, he could walk me through the North Carolina experience, having played there and really played there in the glory days. And there would be nothing that he would face that Jeff Lebo and Hubert Davis haven't seen. So he thought that was important. So I think that's big, that basically he feels like there's not a age divide. There's not an experience divide, that they really mesh, that they've got a lot in common. And that's huge between player and coach, even though you're talking about guys who are maybe 30, 40 years difference in age, that there's not that difference. The other thing that I've noticed is that they're just, I'm trying to think how to say this. There's just that easiness that it just appears to me that they've got, with the players and the coaches. It's not airs. Like I said, I've used that word a lot. No, Stephen A. Smith says, no bloviating, none of that stuff. They just are who they are. And so far, it seems like the players have really kind of convalesced towards that. They like it. And I think we discussed this before. I'm not wearing Carolina shade of blue on my glasses or anything like that. We were critical early on with the Walker Kessler. We thought maybe it steered away Jonas Adu, but since then I think they've kind of found a comfort zone on how to do this. And I really like what he's done so far with this 2022 class.
Yeah, I agree.
Brady Manick put a lot of it to ease. I think maybe when they got that first sign, maybe not the first one, but when they got Brady Manick, people kind of just took a deep breath and said, okay, we're on to something here. And maybe everybody just kind of settled down and got in the comfort zone a little bit.
I thought going full throttle after Kessler, who had already spent a year in your program and didn't want to be a part of it. Well, that was a little bit of a mistake, and it could have cost him a due. But I also posted on our board because people were they were almost panic mode 1 week in. I said, but he had an opportunity to cover. And Justin McCoy was a part. That was a piece that he wanted for a lot of different reasons. McCoy is there. I think it was a good pickup. Getting Manic began that process of recovering. And I think the last, 4 weeks, 3 weeks since then has been pretty good. And I'm really enjoying something new and different, seeing how he's going about this. And like you said, when he's recruiting kids like Justin Taylor, who are going to give us a lot, it's helping us learn a lot. And I do think that over time, Hubert will change some of his approach because he's still feeling stuff out. He doesn't really have a way of doing things yet because it's all so new to him. He will have a way of doing things in a couple of years from now. And it's going to be a lot of fun as you and I go through this process and we chronicle how he gets to wherever he's going to be in a couple years. But I think some of the things that you've picked up on here are going to stay. I think the genuine nature of Hubert, I think the humbleness of him, and I think the straightforwardness. Because look, in his college basketball life, he played for Dean for 4 years, and he coached under Roy for 9 years, and he's had a foot in the program for a lot of that. Like his uncle Walter Davis. That's the way Dean did it, built it, and sustained it. And that's the way Roy had to rebuild it, did it, and sustained it. Sustainability is the key here. You can't be on the map if you're going to sustain things. And I think what we're seeing early on is that the tools are in place for Hubert to sustain it. If he can coach, if he can make investments, if he can motivate, and if he can say the right things during a timeout with 12 minutes left and down 10 on the road in a crazy arena, he's going to have a lot of success because I think all the other boxes check, David.
This is not Scott Drew coming into Baylor or Scott Frost going to Nebraska or Josh Heupel going to Tennessee, where you're looking at once kind of proud programs and you're like, who would want that job? Unrealistic fan base. They've not won in years. If you look at North Carolina, Hubert comes in a pretty good situation where they're not going to be ranked number one next year, but Jeff Brzezzo's had his early 2022 top 25 out. And I think this is third edition. It came out this week. And he's had North Carolina between 18 and 20 in all three. And he's currently number 19. I think that's about right. And I think you look at next year's team, especially Baycott coming back, I think you look at them and they've got a lot of, good pieces, good players. And this could easily be a team next year that, it could be in the top 20, top 25 all year long. So I think when you do that, it kind of steadies you. And I think people get comfortable and they say, hey, it's got off to a good start. This is not, like I said, it's not Steve Forbes at Wake Forest last year walking in and you're just trying to get guys to practice. It's not that. So he's come into a pretty solid situation. You can kind of recruit pieces. You're not desperate. And you're kind of interested to see where you go with that. And look, if you take some of these coaches, I remember Juwan Howard went to Michigan. People said he's never recruited. He's never coached college basketball. He's never recruited before. Is he going to be able to get players there in the Big Ten? He's looking at 2 number one classes in a row. Not saying Hubert Davis is going to 2 number one classes in a row, but you don't necessarily have to be a head coach now for the way things have changed, games changed. You don't have to be, especially with NBA pedigree, you don't have to be a head coach for 30 years before, you start getting it right on the recruiting trail. You can come in and make some inroads right off the bat.
Yeah, well, he's been on a bench for 9 years. He was 7 years before that, going around taking notes everywhere he went, watching the game. And, I don't think the knowledge of the game and understanding the pulse of college basketball is an issue for him. Because it's going to come down to what I was talking about. You push the right button, you're down the road. You can motivate a team in a game where it's got Miami coming in and it's bookended by games with FSU and Duke or something like that. They got to be ready on those nights too. Those are the things that determine how successful he is. And by the way, I agree with that preseason ranking for North Carolina. I do think that the chances of them moving higher than that are far greater than them falling behind that and maybe not even being ranked. I think there's a much greater chance that they could punch their way top 10 than fall out of the rankings, because I think a lot of the parts that they have are going to improve a lot this off season, because all those freshmen that they relied on, they were the 325th most experienced team last year. Brady Manick will be 23 when the season starts. Yeah, Justin McCoy is going to be 21 when the season starts. All those freshmen are going to be a year older. Leakey will be 22. They're going to be a much older, more experienced team with the benefit of having all those guys come back and play in Chapel Hill this summer. None of those kids had a chance to do it last year. So I do think that Hubert's taking over in a very good situation. But this class of 22, the kids that we talked about tonight, they're going to be a big part of determining where Hubert takes it when some of these heritage kids move on.
And if I'm Hubert, I'm going to tell you something, another thing I sell. I was listening to Dan Dockich on XM radio earlier this afternoon, and he had Danny Hurley on, who's at UConn. And you know what he's selling to players right now? It is players want to play here, they don't transfer. He said, we don't have, you come here, you stay. We don't have guys, we got a program. We're not running in and out of the transfer portal like everybody else in the country. And I think Hubert can say that. You've said over and over and over that the reports of the mass exodus North Carolina program during the offseason were well overblown. That wasn't the case. And there's guards that's coming back. I mean, there's no way people would have thought Caleb Love and RJ Davis were both coming back. And you kept hearing people, is Kerwin Walton leaving? Well, no, Kerwin Walton leaving. Is Leaky Black leaving? No. You got those guys back. So you not only you got a pretty good roster, you got a deep roster. And you've got Baycott coming back. A lot of people thought he might know. I mean, people were thinking every post was gone. So I think right now, here we are, the first week of May, and while other people are scrambling and you don't even know the players on your roster, most college basketball fans, if you said name 5 players on your roster, they couldn't do it. So, North Carolina's just pretty steady. It's just, if you're looking for headlines and front page stories, the New York Post, look somewhere else. But it's just pretty steady right now.
Yeah, we didn't jump on Armageddon. We didn't make a huge deal about it because we and I'm not tooting our own horns. Just you and I did a podcast 2.5 weeks ago where we talked about how Manick can help Armando and how Armando can help Manick and all that kind of stuff, because we understood what the situation was. And I think that that's great for Hubert, because even if they don't add another part, and there's some little stuff that maybe they might try to bring in a big kid because they got to have somebody to back up Armando some. But Hubert has already been able to envision next year's team for a few weeks now, where a lot of other coaches can't yet do that. We have the transfer portal on notifications on Twitter, and for football and basketball, it's going like mad all over the place. But there's some fortification going on in Chapel Hill, and these are all things that are going to help Hubert, and Hubert's part of that. Let's face it. If there were some guys that were thinking, maybe they stopped thinking about it because they like what they have there. They're comfortable with whatever decisions Roy was making before he made his announcement. And of course, with Hubert taking over, I think the kids like him a lot. I think they trust him a lot. And, you recruit your own guys, and they already know you and they believe in you, except one of them who took off. Other kids are going to see that too during this time of chaos.
Yeah. Like I say, I've always said this. People ask me about every hire. People say, was this a good hire? Was it a bad hire? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's give it 3 or 4 years and let's see. And I'm talking about whether it's Hubert Davis or whether it's Chris Beard or whether it's Mike Woodson or anybody.
Yeah.
And not just basketball, but football for everything. Because how many coaches, we've said this before, how many coaches did we think were home run hires? We thought Shaka Smart was the greatest hire ever was. And you saw what happened.
Archie Miller.
And everybody thought Rick Barnes they'd hired him as basically as just for a retirement package. So you can see, I just, like I said, I think you take a couple of years, but I just kind of like with steadiness. There's not panic right now. He seems to be comfortable on the recruiting trail of being himself. If somebody said, if one of these kids say, well, he's talking about his NBA days, and boy, he takes over a phone and he's dominating. He's swaggy Hubert when he walks in. I'm like, uh-oh, that's not who he is.
Yeah.
He's being himself.
Well,
it's resonating with the players, and I just think that's good.
That's not who Dean was. That's not who Roy is. That's who he learned from. And I think that's one of the reasons. Well, I can tell you for sure, in talking to some of the people I talked to over there, that's one of the reasons they hired him, because they just like him. They like him. They trust him. And he's got those boxes checked. He's David Sisk. I'm Andrew Jones. Go over to TarHeelIllustrated.com. Just $8.33 a month. And you can have all of David's wisdom. And he only does a couple podcasts a month, so you've got to read his stuff, you got to see what he puts on the board to know everything that's going on in the world of David Sisk and everything else, THI football recruiting, our observations, all that kinds of stuff. We're rolling out some really cool stuff about basketball players and returning players. This week we focused on Caleb Love. Next week we're going to focus, I don't know, maybe RJ Davis. We haven't decided yet, but we've already got the stuff ready to roll out, and we do a different player every week. He's David. I'm AJ. Thanks for stopping by.